The other day, someone said to me, I haven't seen any new Last Chance videos. And I thought, yeah, I haven't been doing a very good job of keeping up with that. I have a whole list of topics to talk about, and there's also just talking about what I'm doing in the moment, but I'm so used to doing the reviews that I think I kind of get caught up in that sometimes, and I don't do a very good job of balancing everything out. Since the main thing I'm doing right now is writing scripts, and I plan to make a video soon about my first screenwriting challenge experiment, I thought I'd make a video about one of the topics off of my list, why I chose to leave Los Angeles. So Los Angeles, almost from the beginning of the motion picture industry, has been the center of filmmaking. It started off in New York City, but shortly thereafter, someone visited the LA and Southern California area and realized that you had the whole world at your fingertips, all within a couple of 100 miles of Los Angeles. There's a famous map, and if I can find it, I'll include it here, that shows all the different substitutions people can make in LA for places like Europe, or the deserts of Africa, or the Middle East. Pretty much any type of climate or terrain you were looking for was local. The weather was mostly mild, it didn't rain that much, and it was rarely cloudy, so there was lots of natural sun. Los Angeles was like a living movie set. So at the beginning of the 20th century, studios started to migrate from the East Coast to the West, and ever since, Los Angeles has been the place where the movies have lived. I say Los Angeles and not Hollywood because Hollywood is just one area in the city, and while several studios were located there at one time, they've since spread all over LA County. So why would I, someone whose dream it has been to be a filmmaker since I was in my teens, leave the place where filmmaking really happens? Isn't Los Angeles the place to be when it comes to meeting people, getting work, and making a name for yourself? Yes. The answer is yes, it certainly can be that. It has been that for most of its existence. And I'm not certain that it still is that now, at least not 100%. But if you are a filmmaker, especially in the United States, it's certainly still very much the Holy Land. There's so much history there. There's so many film-related events there, and a lot of the business is still there. So why leave? I keep asking that question over and over again in this video to give you a little bit of an idea of what it was like to make that decision. Just constantly asking yourself that. And it was not an easy one. There were so many times when my first thought was, if you do this, it's over. You'll never get to make anything again. You'll never get a chance to do like others have done before you and end up at the right party and meet the right person and have everything click so that your career takes off. But here's the reality of the situation. I left Los Angeles a long time ago. And that's not a metaphor, by the way. When I first moved out there after school in 2005, I ended up taking a job in San Antonio, Texas in 2007. So that was the first time I moved away from Los Angeles. In 2009, I took a job at an advertising agency in Culver City and ended up moving back. I worked there for almost 2.5 years, and I had an opportunity to do something with some friends back in Nashville for 6 months. So I left that job and moved back to Nashville for what was supposed to be 6 months and ended up being 1.5 years. When things were winding down there, I was kind of getting an itch to move back to LA and try being a freelancer. I had never done any freelancing in Los Angeles. I'd always had a full-time job. So I had some money saved up and I hit the road. Moved back to LA, started freelancing and got some regular work in the beginning. And then I started to struggle. I would get work and then I would have a dry spell, get work, dry spell. It was this sort of like never-ending cycle. Eventually, the dry spells got a little bit too long and I went broke and had to move back home. Now, are you keeping up with me? Because this is a lot of moves back and forth over the years. So by this point, I'm back in Nashville and I'm staying with my parents for a little while. And when I was finally able to build back some money, get some work going, I could move out and get a place with a friend. And I'm doing all right at this point. Not exactly killing it, but getting on track again. Then at the tail end of 2016, I get into an email conversation with one of the people I used to freelance for in Los Angeles, and they're putting together a new company. They need an editor, and by February 2017, I've got my life packed up in a Penske truck again, and I'm heading back to Hollywood. Now, some people in my life out in Tennessee were not happy that I did this. They felt like it was a mistake. But here's the thing. I said to myself a long time ago that if I ever got a job offer back out in LA and they paid me a decent wage and it was a full-time gig and provided benefits, that I would at least consider taking it. And that's exactly what happened. It was fate or part of the plan or however you want to look at it. So I'm out there. Again, why leave? I was out in it. I was where you're supposed to be if you want to do what I want to do. Have you ever heard of the Duplass brothers? Two brothers that created a filmmaking team. They made like a ton of films and TV shows like The Puffy Chair, Togetherness, Jeff Who Lives at Home, and Room 104. So those guys came out with a book in 2018 called Like Brothers, and it was sort of an autobiography of their working relationship, how and why they became filmmakers and how they keep themselves as brothers from killing each other. It's actually a really good read, and you should check it out if you haven't. In the chapter of the book called Unsolicited Advice Part 1, Housing, great title, they write, while you are woodshedding and developing your craft, do not live in a big city with expensive rents. Find a place like Detroit or New Orleans, even the outskirts of Portland and Austin. These places offer a community of creative, smart, young underdogs chasing their dreams, with affordable housing to boot. Live here until you need to live in one of the major markets, which is maybe never, by the way. Have you ever read something that just resonates with you and you're like, why didn't I think about that? Or more likely, why am I not doing that? So here I am in 2018 thinking, man, those Duplass brothers are onto something. But isn't LA where I'm supposed to be? I mean, I've got this job and I've got friends and family here. It's not my favorite place in the world, but this is where it's all happening, isn't it? And, the same thing happens to everyone who's an adult with a day job and some semblance of a social life. You get busy and you let those things go and you think about them less and less as time goes on and days go by, weeks go by, and eventually a year goes by. And in 2019, I find myself thinking about those things all over again. Should I be living someplace else, more manageable and working on my personal projects, or should I stay here in Los Angeles? Yes, there's opportunity galore, but it's also oppressively expensive. The traffic is demoralizing. It can be incredibly lonely even when you do have friends. And sometimes it just feels like the city swallows you up. This guy at work had been working from home 3 days a week and announced that he was going to go fully remote and move across the country. And I started thinking, is that something that I could do? So I sat down and I talked to my boss about it, and he said that he would at least think about it. And then COVID hit. And basically immediately everyone in the company was remote. Didn't matter who you were, we were all working from home. And suddenly the answer became, yes, you can feel free to relocate. My boss announced pretty early into all of it that we were going fully remote, and more than likely we just would not be coming back to the office unless something needed to be shot. Well, I wasn't really doing a lot of shooting by that point anyway. I was mainly just doing editing, so it made sense for me to pack up and say so long to LA. Of course, I wouldn't be able to do that until almost a year and a half later when the vaccine finally came out. And at that point, I felt comfortable actually making the move and being around some of my loved ones who, I just would not otherwise feel comfortable be comfortable being around unless I was vaccinated. So this whole thing is not quite that simple though. If that was all that was behind it, I wouldn't even bother making this video. There's actually 3 reasons I made the decision to move away from the town that is the hub of my industry. The first we'll get out of the way real quick because I'm not really going to dive that deep into it, and that is family. I have some family out here in Nashville, in the Nashville area, and at this point in time in my life, I feel like I need to be with them. Simple enough. The second reason is money. I have some personal debt that I've been carrying for a long time, and LA is expensive. Even though I was making decent money, a lot of times I was just sort of like scraping by because things add up really quickly out there, especially for people making under 6 figures. And when debt takes a chunk of your paycheck every 2 weeks, that doesn't help out either. I was able to pay my bills, but I couldn't really get ahead. Now, there are things I could have done to get around a little bit of that. I could have gotten a place with a roommate and saved some money, but some of that would have been eaten up in gas and, time, because we would have had to have gotten a place a lot farther away from where I was working. I mean, I was living in a tiny studio apartment just north of Culver City and working in Santa Monica, so it really wasn't that far of a drive. And for most of the time I was out there, I was taking the train back and forth to work. So a lot of my bills like gas, car maintenance, stuff like that, that was like almost non-existent for me because I just didn't drive that much. You know, moving out here though nuked a whole bunch of bills that I had. I'm paying half of what I was paying in rent, and literally everything else is cheaper. Now, right now in 2022, we're going through an inflationary period. So food and gas and all the basics, you know, they're certainly getting more expensive, but a lot of stuff out here is still a lot cheaper than it would be in Los Angeles. And for the first time in 4 years, I'm seeing my debt go down in chunks. And I cannot tell you how excited I am to see that number go lower and lower every month. It genuinely brings joy to my heart. And that is a very important thing in your life, to be debt-free. One of the best things you can do for yourself is being debt-free, for real. And I'm very much looking forward to hopefully hitting that mark this year. That leaves us with the third reason I left LA. This one is a little less concrete. It's like a little bit more nebulous. For whatever reason, and I've never been able to nail it down, when I'm out there, my ability to be creative, my ability to write, my ability to come up with ideas and feel like I'm operating at sort of like peak creativity just seems to drop. If my creativity is like a volume knob, it's like someone's turning the knob down. Maybe not all the way, but the what was like once a stream goes down to a trickle. Now, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the city or being overstimulated by all the film-related stuff out there, or just the sheer amount of stress that living in that city puts into your life just as a side effect of living there. But I have always had a much easier time being creative outside of Los Angeles than I have when I was living there. Like I said, it's probably a whole bunch of factors, and there is a possibility that if I could live there and mitigate some of those factors, maybe a balance could be struck. But I can tell you that during the last 4 years that I lived there, I barely wrote anything. It was like someone just turned the faucet off. I felt so adrift in that space. It was like I was dying. There were times when I genuinely wondered if I had lost my creativity completely, if I just was no longer able to create stuff. And that's actually part of the reason that I was doing the Frank's List videos, is to try and like spur some of that on. Like I looked at that as an opportunity to like make videos and try and like maybe break some of that loose. So anyway, you know, I moved back home, and within a couple of months, I'm writing features again. I've got ideas. I'm thinking about shorts. Someone turned on the faucet. And to be clear, I'm not trying to say it's all wine and roses. I have my challenges right now that I'm working through, but I'm doing things I haven't been able to do in a long time. And I think that means something, you know? You know, I have friends and family in LA, and while I do miss them, and I'm not trying to, you know, piss on anybody's experience by saying this, but I would be remiss if I didn't include this in the video. Los Angeles and I have always had a contentious relationship. We're like that couple that's always screaming at each other, and you think like, why are they even together? And then we split up for a while, and then we come back together, and then we start fighting again, then we break up again. That's what it's been like for me all this time. Do I want to work in this industry? Absolutely. Do I think I can do it outside of Los Angeles? I'll be honest, like I'm not 100% yes on this. I know it's going to be an enormous struggle, but I think we live in the best possible age to try it. People from all over the country and all over the globe are getting an opportunity to play the game without stepping a foot in LA. Tons of well-known actors and industry people are moving to other parts of the country and flying in when they're needed so that they can live a more normal, low-key lifestyle. If ever there was a time to try and make it outside of the city, now is it. It certainly wasn't that way in 2005 when I first moved there. And don't get me wrong, this video is not a you shouldn't move to Los Angeles hate video. If you want to move there, feel free. I'm not trying to stop anyone. In fact, before I left, I asked myself, what would make you move back once you leave? Is there something that would make you move back? Because I set a goal before and said that if that gets met, I would be willing to move back. And it did, which I still think is crazy. But I thought long and hard about it and came up with 2 scenarios that I feel pretty confident in that would bring me back to Los Angeles. I'm not going to tell you what those are. You know, sorry, but that stays private. That way, if one of them ever does happen, then I will know that it was meant to be. So that's why I left Los Angeles in a nutshell. Again, this is not a don't move to Los Angeles video, but I think that what the Duplessis said definitely holds some water. If you have some resources where you are, start there. Make things, get them seen, enter into festivals. Work on your work, because if you move to Los Angeles, what happens a lot of times is that you end up working on everyone else's work in order to survive. It's expensive out there, and your dollar can stretch a lot farther in a lot of other places. Make your movie. That's the important thing now, because as they say in the book,
the cavalry isn't coming.
It's on us now to keep churning out work and to get noticed. I know LA seems cool and fun, and in some ways it really can be, especially if you're flush with cash. But if you have a vision and you want to make personal films, then there's no better place to start than where you are. I'm going to tell you right now, with the money I've spent moving stuff back and forth to LA over all these years and wherever else I was living, I could have financed 1 or 2 micro budget features or like probably a dozen shorts. Start where you are and keep making stuff. If you're good, Hollywood will find you. That's it for this video. Like I said at the beginning, I have more last chance filmmaker content I want to make. I just need to do a better job of balancing it with the other stuff I'm doing on this channel. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button below it, and please consider subscribing. Subs go a long way to making it possible to monetize the channel, which means I can potentially expand the kind of content that I'm doing here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.